Every spring, without fail, we get the same question at the shop. Someone comes in, the weather's turned, there's a bit of sunshine, and they say, "My fish are at the surface. Should I be feeding them?" And the honest answer is probably not yet. But what I want to do today is explain why. Because the advice you'll get, stop feeding at 10 degrees, start again at 10 degrees, is correct. But it doesn't tell you anything about what's actually happening inside the fish. And if you understand the biology, you'll be a much better keeper, and you'll stop second guessing yourself every time there's a warm day in February or March. We're going to go through the physiology of what cold water does to a fish's metabolism, what controls appetite at a hormonal level, why undigested food in a cold pond is genuinely dangerous, and then how to read the transition back into spring correctly. There's some good peer-reviewed science to pull on here, and as always, all references are in the description. Hello, my name is Harris Bard for Pond Life Aquatics and Tropical Fish London. And the starting point for all of this is a word you might have come across, Poikilotherm. It just means an organism whose internal temperature tracks its environment. Fish are poikilotherms, cold-blooded if you prefer, which means that when your pond drops to 8 degrees, their body is running at 8 degrees. But why does that matter? Because almost every biochemical process in the body is catalyzed by enzymes, and enzymes are exquisitely sensitive to temperature. Lower the temperature and you slow the reaction rate. That's not a disease. It's not a problem to solve. It's basic chemistry. The fish isn't broken. It's simply running at a fraction of the speed it was in August. This affects everything. Digestion slows, circulation slows, immune function slows, liver metabolism slows, and critically, appetite regulation changes. A 2020 review by Volkov and Ronstad, published in Journal Temperature, is probably the most comprehensive overview of how temperature affects feeding and digestion processes in fish. Their key conclusion: temperature change affects not just the desire to eat, but the physical ability to process food once it's consumed. Those are two separate problems and both matter. So what actually tells a koi or a goldfish to stop wanting food? It's not just that the fish feels cold and sulks. There's a genuine hormonal signal driving appetite suppression, and the key hormone involved is leptin. Now, if you know leptin from mammalian biology or GCSE biology in the UK, you know it's a satiety signal, the hormone released by fat tissue that tells your brain you've had enough to eat. Fish leptin works similarly, but with one important difference. In fish, it's produced primarily by the liver, not fat tissue, and it's strongly temperature dependent. A study by Chen and colleagues published in 2019 in Frontiers in Endocrinology looked specifically at goldfish across seasonal transitions. They found as water temperature fell from a summer average of around 28 degrees down to a winter average of around 15 degrees, foraging activity and food consumption both dropped significantly. And running alongside that behavioural change was a measurable rise in liver leptin 1 and leptin 2 mRNA, the molecular signal telling the fish's brain to eat less. Worth noting that the winter temperature in that study was 15 degrees, warmer than a UK pond in January. Biology doesn't switch off at 15 and wait. It's a continuous response as temperatures fall, and at 8 or 10 degrees, the signal is even stronger. So the fish isn't choosing to stop eating out of stubbornness. It receives a biochemical instruction driven by the temperature to reduce appetite. That instruction evolved over millions of years, and it's appropriate to the fish's physiology. The fish doesn't need the same caloric intake at 8 degrees than it does at 22 degrees because its metabolic demand has dropped dramatically. There's also a photoperiod element. Day lengths interact with temperature to reinforce the seasonal signal. So a warm day in January, however encouraging it might feel to the fish keeper, doesn't flip that switch back on. The fish's endocrine system is integrating multiple environmental cues, not just the thermometer. Now, here's where it gets practically important. Let's say you ignore the temperature and feed your koi anyway because they came to the surface and looked hungry, which they will do because the leptin signal isn't absolute. What actually happens? There's actually two problems that run in parallel. The first problem is undigested food in the gut. At low temperatures, digestive enzyme activity drops sharply. Trypsin, lipase, and amylase, the key enzymes your fish's gut uses to break down protein, fat, and carbohydrates, are all working at a fraction of their normal efficiency. The gut microbiome, which contributes significantly to enzyme production in fish, is also suppressed at lower temperatures. That's well established in the aquaculture literature. The result, food that enters the gut at 5 or 6 degrees doesn't get digested properly. It sits there. It begins to ferment and rot in the intestinal tract. This can lead to gut inflammation, bloating, and in serious cases, constipation that can become life-threatening. You'll sometimes see fish in spring that look unusually swollen, especially in the abdomen area. And cold water overfeeding over winter is one of the less obvious causes. Problem 2 is water quality. Any food that doesn't get eaten sinks to the bottom and decomposes. In summer, your filter bacteria deal with this reasonably well. In winter, your filter bacteria are also operating at a reduced capacity. Remember, Nitrosomonas and Nitrospira are themselves temperature sensitive. Bacterial activity in a biological filter drops significantly below 10 degrees. So you have decomposing organic matter, a suppressed filter, and fish already under physiological stress from the cold. That combination can produce ammonia spikes in early spring when the water temperature warms just enough to accelerate decomposition, but before the filter has fully recovered. This is one of the reasons why spring is the most dangerous season for pond fish, and overfeeding through winter makes it worse. So let's talk numbers. The guidance you'll see everywhere, stop at 10 degrees, start again at 10 degrees, is a reasonable approximation, but let's add some nuance. The critical zone is between roughly 4 and 12 degrees. Below 4 degrees, metabolism is so low that feeding should stop entirely. The fish will actively avoid food. Digestive enzymes are barely functional, and there is essentially no benefit to feeding. Between 4 and 10 degrees, the fish may show intermittent interest in food, but their ability to digest normal, high-protein feed is severely compromised. Between 10 and 14 degrees is the transition zone where wheat germ-based foods make sense. Wheat germ is nutritionally dense but much more easily digestible than standard higher protein pellets. Lower protein, higher fiber, simpler carbohydrate profile. The fish's reduced enzyme activity can still process it without the gut fermentation risk. If you are going to feed in this range, and I'd say ideally stay above 10 degrees before you start, the product I specifically recommend is NT Labs Probiotic Wheatgerm and Garlic. I'm not sponsored by them, but the reason I'd single that one out is the probiotic enzyme blend. Because the fish's own digestive enzyme activity is suppressed at these temperatures and the gut microbiome is still running at reduced capacity, having probiotic support built into the food helps bridge that gap. It aids digestion and specifically reduces the bloating risk you get when gut fermentation of partially digested foods occur. The garlic component also has a mild appetite stimulating effect and immune supporting effect, which is useful at the start of spring when the immune system is just coming back online. It's a well thought out formulation for exactly this part of the season. Above 14 to 15 degrees, you can transition back to standard diet gradually. I always recommend people to mix their Wheatgerm and their standard high protein foods. And above 18 degrees, the fish are operating more normally and can handle high protein growth foods again. The reason I always recommend a thermometer rather than just watching your fish is exactly what I said at the start. Fish will come to the surface and beg even when they shouldn't be eating. That's not a reliable guide to their digestive capacity. The thermometer is. Invest in a decent pond thermometer. Keep it in the same spot each time and check it before you feed, not after. It's where people get it wrong most often, and it's totally understandable. You've gone months without feeding and your fish look skinny. You're excited to see them feed again, but the temptation to overfeed in early spring before the biology has actually caught up with the warmer temperatures causes a lot of preventable problems. A few things to watch for beyond just the thermometer reading. First, consistency matters more than a single reading. One warm afternoon where the surface hits 11 degrees doesn't mean it's time to start feeding. You'd want to see the pond holding above 10 degrees reliably, including in the morning before the sun has warmed it up. Temperature stratification is real in deeper ponds. The bottom, where your fish have been sitting all winter, warms up last. Second, watch your fish's behaviour, but interpret it correctly. Fish actively swimming at all depths and showing coordinated foraging behaviour is different from fish drifting to the surface on a warm afternoon. The former suggests the metabolism is genuinely coming back online. The latter is just a temperature response. Third, start small. When you do begin feeding, tiny amounts of Wheatgerm once a day and watch what happens. If food disappears quickly and the fish remain active, you can gradually increase it. If food is left, stop. The gut needs time to rebuild its bacterial community and enzyme capacity after months of suppression. Rushing it is simply not worth it. One more thing worth saying, spring is the high-risk season for disease outbreaks in pond fish. And one of the reasons is exactly the immune suppression I mentioned earlier. Cold temperatures blunt the immune response. As the fish warms up and starts moving around more, any parasites that have been quietly present over winter suddenly encounter a host whose immune defenses are only just coming back online. We'll be covering spring sickness in an entirely separate video, but it's worth knowing that keeping feeding conservative in early spring is one way to reduce the metabolic stress on fish that are already immunologically vulnerable. So let's bring it all together. Pond fish stop eating in winter because they're Poikilotherms. Their metabolism runs at the temperature of the water. Below 10 degrees, leptin signaling suppresses appetite. Digestive enzyme activity drops sharply, and the gut microbiome is suppressed. This is not a problem. It is a physiological adaptation. Feeding in cold water risks gut fermentation from undigested food, ammonia accumulation from decomposing uneaten food, and additional stress on fish that are already physiologically compromised by the cold. The practical rules: below 10 degrees, don't feed. Between 10 and 14, Wheatgerm only and in small amounts. Above 14 to 15, begin to transition back to a normal diet. You can do this by mixing Wheatgerm with higher protein feeds. And above 18 degrees, feed normally. Use a thermometer, not the fish's behavior as your guide. Fish will beg even when they shouldn't eat. The thermometer won't lie to you. And finally, be patient in spring. The fish have had a long winter. So has your filter. Give both of them time to come back properly before you push hard on feeding. As always, I'll link all the papers referenced in this video in the description below. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comments below, or come and find us at Finchley Nurseries, London, NW7 1AS. We're more than happy to talk to you guys. Thank you so much for all the comments on the previous couple of science videos. It's been really heartening to see. If you've enjoyed this pond video, there'll be more of them to come. I've got a lot of content planned for the next year and a half at this point now. But for now, that's all from me. And I hope you'll join me again next time for this pond life.